HBK Wellness Wednesday, everyone. Master trainer and wellness enthusiast, Kiona Leah. Back with you guys again. Not as high quality as normal. I apologize. My good camera is in the shop for a little bit of repairs. So these might be a little more grainy than you're used to. But don't worry, she'll be back soon and we'll get back to our beautiful, crisp recordings. In the meantime, I really wanted to make sure to get you guys some good, important information anyway. I was having a lovely discussion on Monday with one of the newest students in the class who has been struggling with rebuilding her health for several years now. I can certainly empathize. And we got into chatting about that. And it was really interesting because on Sunday, I was thinking about talking about the gut-brain axis. And that conversation with her on Monday kind of sealed the deal for you guys. So what is this gut-brain axis? Have you heard of it? Do you know anything about it? We're going to talk a little bit about it today. Not a whole lot, but believe me, you can go on and on and on and on about this amazing, evolving part of scientific and medical research that has been part of the human microbiome project that's been going on now for several years. I'm going to give you guys a bunch of links below to a lot more information, a lot more details, and some great resources than just these few minutes together can provide you guys. But let's talk about it. Now, this gut-brain axis, what is it really? It is, in a lot of ways, the meeting place between your central nervous system, moves all those muscles, and your enteric or autonomic nervous system, the one that does everything else without you thinking. Digestion, breathing sometimes. Breathing is always an interesting one because you don't have to think about breathing, but you can. So that one is an interesting little bridge. Blood flow, heart rate, endocrine function, things of that nature. If we really think about our autonomic nervous system, it's got two major components to it. It's got the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and it's got the parasympathetic, rest, digest. Those two pieces come together in this gut-brain axis, and they help affect the brain and the rest of the central nervous system. Now, one of the huge pieces of this that people have heard of quite a bit now, and you can't turn on the TV and watch an Activia commercial without hearing about the microbiome. Really what that is that is the collection of bacteria and other microorganisms in your intestines, in your gut, from the small intestine to the large intestine, all throughout those areas that are helping your body to do all of its functions. The amazing thing is this little microbiome has 100 trillion cells on average. Now, just for comparison, the rest of your body, all of those cells, they're about 10 to 12 trillion. So you have 10 times more gut bacteria and microbes than you do cells themselves. So obviously these guys, they're doing quite a bit. In fact, if you look at the entirety of the genetic material, there is 150 times more genetic material in those microbes inside your gut than there is in the rest of you. That's a lot of information, that's a lot of data, and that is a lot of work that those little bugs are doing with and for you. But we got to make sure to help them out. So what are some of the things that they do? Now, let's talk about some of those pathways between the gut and the brain. One of them we've talked about before, and that is our vagus nerve, coming down from the brain and the brainstem through the neck, winding around all of the viscera through the center of the body, and really informing a lot of information. And we want to work with that vagus nerve as much as we can to be able to keep things in balance. You don't necessarily want your vagus nerve stimulated or too calm. It needs to be healthy and active and in shape, much like the exercise that we do. It's not just about strength. It's not just about cardio. It's not just about flexibility. It's about them all. Same is true of that vagus nerve if you really want that gut brain axis working properly. So that's one of our first major avenues between the two. The brain, via signals on the vagus nerve, informs the gut, and those microbes in the gut will inform the intestinal lining, the walls, and the nerve cells in the gut, which will then go back up that vagus nerve to the brain. Tells you when you're full, tells you when you're scared, tells you when you are a lot of things. And a lot of us have felt that tightening in our stomach when we're nervous or anxious or afraid or excited, right? Different signals, or are they just translated different? Not quite sure. But that is one of the major ways. Now, there are tons of hormonal pathways that also are informed, because those little bugs actually make some of those hormones, or they make nutrients. They make things like GABA, they make things like tryptophan, they make things like butyric acid, all of which affect the nervous system and or the endocrine and hormonal system of the body. So let's talk about some of these and how those relate to other parts of the body and what we think, feel, remember, or do. First and foremost, let's talk about serotonin. Now, serotonin is not made in the gut, but what is made is tryptophan. Tryptophan is made by some of those little bugs, and tryptophan is one of the main ingredients used in serotonin. Now, for those of you guys that work with depressive and anxiety issues, I bet you're familiar with those SSRIs. Serotonin is the big thing in the brain that they're really trying to work with. But how exciting is it that you could shift what you're eating? And that can also change that serotonin in your brain. Talk about another fantastic tool in your toolbox of really starting to understand this gut-brain axis. What a difference in helping to treat these depressive and anxiety disorders we can really come to and feel more empowered with a lot less side effects, or maybe rather than side effects that put 20 pounds on, might help take a few pounds off. Thinking about that microbiome and really helping support our gut health. Absolutely amazing possibilities that are really being well researched now. So stay tuned, or link on some of those links below and get that information. Next, dopamine. Here is another one of our feel-good hormones. Just like serotonin, when it's too low, we feel depressed. Dopamine, if it gets too high, because we have too many of the bugs that are producing dopamine in our gut, which is then being absorbed through those thin intestinal walls into our bloodstream, and therefore affecting the rest of our nervous system and our brain, those can lead to things like schizophrenia. Now, this is something that for so long, so many have struggled so much, and it feels so hopeless. But what if it's not? What if changes in your diet, changes in that gut, probiotics, digestive enzymes can all help bring those pieces together? Absolutely amazing research that's being done. And there are other brain disorders as well, but we're not going to touch on those because they are crazy complicated and the research is still really new. But one last little piece that you guys know is near and dear to my heart, and that is inflammation. You guys know I've talked about systemic inflammation and all the different anti-inflammatory things that I go through, some of which upset my gut if I'm not careful, which is why I don't tend to take things like Tylenol, aspirin, and ibuprofen, because they irritate more than they help whatever's hurting somewhere else. But this is another really exciting field, that gut permeability, and especially when we look at things like irritable bowel syndrome, can really start to affect and inform that systemic inflammation in the body. Now, that doesn't just have to be aches and pains. It can also be allergies, whether they be respiratory allergies, whether they be food allergies, or other things of that nature. They could potentially be autoimmune disorders. And one of the big links that's been found in several studies is the link between IBS and, again, anxiety and depression. Much greater percentage of people with those disorders that have IBS than in the general population. So there's definitely a link. We're all still exploring it. And I know as I go through my learning process with my doctors and nutritionists, I'm going to keep you guys updated on more and more and more ideas, thoughts, and things to help inform that gut, calm it down, increase permeability, get rid of overgrowth that we may not want, which is why sometimes we have to be careful with our probiotics. Because if you have too many bacteria in your small intestine, probiotics are going to make it worse, not better. So that is a little quickie on the gut-brain axis. What else do you guys want to learn about? What other topics are interested and curious for you guys? Next week, probably looking at lower body stuff. So we may be looking at joints or something of that nature. So make sure, comment below or send your questions to me directly and we'll talk about it next week. But in the meantime, I'm Kiona Leah. I want to see you move, live, and thrive. So I'll see you on the next one.